So it's looking like we're set. Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Cosplay Bites, the show about cosplays, conventions, and all the other extra nerdy bits and bytes. This episode, I was given the awesome opportunity to interview with me here Andrew Liptak. Did I get that right?
You
Pronunciation?
did.
Awesome.
Good.
Sweet. Smooth sailing from here on out. Yeah, I was reached out by him and his publicist about a book that Andrew's been writing and is set to release later this summer in June. Basically titled "Cosplay: A History." And so, for starters, yeah, I'll just let Andrew. I'll let you tell us a little bit about yourself in terms of your relation to cosplay and all that.
Sure. So I started costuming right after I got out of high school. And this was 2003. And my origin story, which I talk a bit about in the book, is I was a Star Wars fan from the moment I saw it in 1997 with the special editions. And
Oh yeah.
from that first film, I really wanted to make a stormtrooper costume. I don't know, it was just they looked cool. And just for years I had just thought they were just kind of the neat looking characters. So I tried to sort of figure out how to do it, like how to make my own, and never really kind of got around to it. I sort of thought about it for shop class when I was in high school, like, oh, maybe I can make this out of metal. It didn't quite work. I don't know why I didn't quite think of it to make it out of cardboard, other than I wanted it to look right, and I didn't really want to do it like a bad version. So
Sure.
I just sort of, it was just sort of one of those things I just sort of waited until the right opportunity. And that opportunity came at the end of my high school time in high school. I was in band. We were playing Star Wars, and I convinced my music teacher to let us play Star Wars and various pieces from the trilogy. And he agreed,
Nice.
and we invited a stormtrooper up to my high school. Actually, a guy named Scott Allen, who lived in Rhode Island, and he drove all the way up to Vermont, showed up in his armor, and yeah, that was it. After the performance, that blew everybody away. And after the performance, I asked him, like, how do I get my own set of this? And he said, well, you can, I can sell it to you. So I had a job that summer, saved up some money, sent it off to him, and at the end of the summer, I got a big box of armor that I put together, and I had my own stormtrooper.
Wow.
So that's how I sort of started getting into it. And from there, I'd never been to a convention before. I'd never been to, like, I don't think I even really heard of Comic-Con until a little bit later. But I'll bring the armor out for like a couple times in college, and then in other like for Halloween or at the summer camp where I worked, and that pretty low key stuff. And then 2005, Revenge of the Sith was coming out, and I went to Star Wars Celebration in Indianapolis, and so it was kind of a cool opportunity. I shipped my armor out there, got a hotel room, and hung out at the convention for like 4 or 5, probably 4 or 5 days, 3 or 4 days. Made a ton of friends, and was finally like sort of like among other people who had the same interest as me. So like tons of other stormtroopers. I was helping out with. I volunteered at the con, which is why I was able to go. The 501st had like a volunteer relationship with the convention, and I was basically the guy at the end of for all 3 days or all 4 days, whatever it was. I was the guy at the end of the line for all the author signings. So I think Del Rey Random House had a booth, and so Timothy Zahn, Matthew Stover, Karen Travis, Michael Stack, no, not Michael Stack, Aaron Alston, like they all had signings. So I would basically stand at the end of the line and basically say, all right, this line is capped, or like move along.
Okay.
And so that was just like a really, yeah. So it was a mind blowing experience. It was a lot of fun. I met other members of my fellow garrison who I hadn't really interacted with before, just because of there's not very many other troopers in Vermont. And then that experience really stayed with me. So like after I graduated from college, I had time, I had disposable income because I had a job and I had a car, and so I could throw my armor into the back of my car. I could drive down to an event and troop with the rest of the garrison, and then come back. And so I did that for a bunch of years. I recruited a friend of mine, and we then would start going down together. Went to more conventions, and then as it sort of happens when you start to get more active with cosplay, you start to think, oh, I can make this costume, or I can make that costume. So the next one I built was a Attack of the Clones clone trooper.
Okay.
I want to say that it was sort of because the Clone Wars TV series was coming out, but I always liked the look and feel of that armor. So I just ended up putting it together in my apartment, and then made another one, and then went to other conventions. I made other non-Star Wars costumes. So I made like a Sam Bell costume from Moon, the Duncan Jones film, and a couple of other random ones over the years, and then just sort of kept at it. While this was happening, I worked at a university as an administrator, and also had sort of begun to make the steps into writing as a freelance writer and journalist. So I started writing for a website called IO9, which is part of Gizmodo.
Okay,
and I started to sort of just write about cosplay stuff over the years. When I sort of made the full-time leap into full-time freelance writing for them in 2005, I found it was a really good opportunity just to start writing about conventions that came out or that had just happened, or cosplay music videos. And then I ended up working for a website called The Verge. Wrote a little bit more about cosplay, and then had a couple of coworkers there that really got me thinking about how do you really think about entertainment, and how people are fans, and what does it mean to be a fan. And I a little bit before that, I had been contacted by an editor who had been to San Diego Comic-Con, a guy named Joe Monti. He's the editor at Saga Press, which is my publisher. And he had seen the 501st and wanted to know if there was sort of within the science fiction community, I was sort of, people sort of knew that I was a stormtrooper. So he sort of reached out to me and asked, is there a story about where the 501st came from that might be worth pursuing? And, there was. And we basically put together a pitch with an outline, a fairly detailed outline. And, they were interested. It took a little while for that to sort of get going. And, the actual straight up history of the 501st didn't really go anywhere. But when I got an agent, I basically retooled the project to focus on the entire history of cosplay, not just the 501st. Okay. And I did that because it was while researching it and putting together the history of the 501st, I realized that you needed to have a lot more context for what the world was like. Like the 501st didn't come out of a vacuum. There's an entire story about cosplay that stretches out hundreds of years before Star Wars came out. And within that story is all these other bits and pieces about the history of technology. How do we come to start dressing up in costume in the first place? And, we sold it to them, and basically that's what cosplay history is. It's this really sort of all encompassing story of how do we come to costume? How did the field of cosplay come about? What does it mean within the larger fan community? What does it mean for the relationship that we as fans have with films and entertainment franchises? And how did technology change along the way? And how did these groups like the 501st come about? So it's a really a far-ranging book, and I think it covers just about everything. It's not, I wouldn't say it's comprehensive history, but I think we got a lot of the high points and basically everything from the rise of the 501st to science fiction conventions from the 1930s to 3D printing to everything, a whole bunch of other things. So yeah, it was a fun thing to write, and that's the sort of the long story of how that came about.
Okay. Yeah. Wow. You answered a couple of my questions in one fell swoop, so that's good. That's good. That's good, but it's bad. Crap. What do I talk about now? Yeah. So I mean, you've done it sounds like you've put in a lot of research into this, and sounds like it's just a more like encompassing look about cosplay as a hobby from like its start all the way up to now with
Mhm.
I imagine like all the bits and pieces of how it's evolved from what it used to be to like how it's become almost I get almost like mainstream with the evolution of social media and all that. Um
Yep. Yeah. So there's a couple things that I wanted to focus on, and this is specifically because I worked as a technology reporter, and I have a good friend of mine was an editor there. We were working there at the same time, Brian Bishop, and he while I was working there, he was very much into immersive entertainment, and this was a an interesting concept to me, like just the idea of like he was talking about like immersive theater where you as an audience member would go to a production and you would be part of the show
mm,
as an audience member. You'd be a bystander, but you'd also be part of you'd be sort of directing, like you'd be pushing the story in certain directions, or you'd otherwise be part of the story itself, which I thought was pretty fascinating. And because I had I've been a cosplayer, like you're sort of in that moment when you put on a costume. And so there are some elements of
yeah.
that I really kind of thought were interesting, and he really sort of influenced how I thought about that. And along with that, like there's, we were, always writing about things like Instagram or Facebook and like what power these platforms have. So one of the things that I sort of talk about in the book is the most powerful technology that has come about that has helped the hobby as a whole is not like something like 3D printing or pepakura or laser cutting. It's social media, because
Yeah.
what social media
Yeah.
does is it's been at the heart of why we cosplay in the first place, is to form a community. The fans who showed up at a the first Worldcon in 1939 were, they were all coming together because they all loved science fiction. And um,
Mhm.
the, one of the first cosplayers is a guy named Forrest Ackerman. And his way of expressing fandom was dressing up as one of the characters, and that really caught on in the years that followed. But as you trace the history of cosplay and go from point to point, you realize that that's basically what people are looking for. They're looking to find their fellow members of their tribe, even though they might be spread out all over the country. They might come together to share in this moment with every year, even for just a couple days out of the year, to see their friends that they've only corresponded with or written letters to, or
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
seen rarely. And then as you go further on, you get, when the internet comes about, you have the first internet forums, and then you have websites like anime.com or the Replica Props Forum or
Mhm.
LiveJournal. And you see these communities sort of form because people are seeking one another out. And social media has only really encouraged that. There's downsides to it, obviously, for a myriad of reasons, but like Instagram is perfect for cosplayers because it's such a visual medium. Same thing with TikTok these days. And I know while I was writing the book, I was certainly finding cosplayers because of the recommendations that the app would give me, but also
Yeah.
because like I'd meet somebody and talk to them, and then I would find somebody else that they'd recommend, they would point me to, or I'd see them in the comments or something like that. So that's
Mhm.
sort of, I think, the underlying theme of the book is that this is really this is not a how-to book. It's more a story of how we form communities and how we sort of share in this passion together.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's funny how like you were going through your origin story and then talking about like this like how cosplay has evolved to a point where it is now, like the sort of like finding your own communities, finding your own camaraderie with friends. Like that's essentially what cosplay gave me when I started
Hmm.
back in 2012. Um, my long story short, whole spiel was this was when Jessica Negri was starting to get popular with the Lollipop Chainsaw
Yep.
cosplay that she did when she became a spokesmodel, and she was the first cosplayer I met. Because I mean, it's like the initial like holy smokes, I have a huge crush on her, yada yada yada. When she blew up with her Pikachu outfit, and then
Hmm.
she won. the Lollipop Chainsaw cosplay contest, which allowed her to go on tour, so to speak. And so one of the spots was PAX East 2012, and that was the first con I went. I solely went just to meet her, and then we kind of grew and formed like a special little, almost like a brother sister kind of relationship through going to cons over the years. Like I got my dad into it when he was still around, and seeing my dad cosplay was pretty rad. His whole thing was that he got really into the whole steampunk aspect to a point where he dressed up and made his own steampunk Riddler outfit, and I matched with him as Nightwing. So that was a lot of fun. And
awesome!
All these stories that you mentioned about how like you started writing about like going to cons, like because that's legitimately how I got my own start. So like this whole podcast spun out of a blog that I used to run by myself called The Lightning Palace on Blogspot, where I would essentially go through, find a bunch of these cosplayers, find a bunch of these cosplays that I really liked. I would pick one, try to gather photos of either photo shoots or maybe even some work in progress photos, and I would just talk about how much I liked the cosplay, how it was possibly made, like mentioning what materials they used, how the photo shoots were done, like how the scenery looked and how it matches the character that they cosplayed as. And that spun into me writing convention reports of my times at cons like PAX East, Katsucon, New York Comic Con, and then a bunch of other miscellaneous stuff like video game reviews and all that. But this show kind of spun out of it because I just, because I kind of been doing it. I did it for 7 years. I kind of stopped when the pandemic started because cons were shutting down.
Pandemic.
The world was shutting down. No one was really doing was making cosplays and like going to photo shoots. And so like I was having a really hard time like finding new outfits to like fangirl over and like write about. So it's just like I've kind of just maybe it'd be best to just put it to bed for now. And then so this show was just basically me wanting to do something more to the cosplay community, which had already given me like a bunch of friends, essentially like a second family, and like just a way for me to like truly be myself and express my love for like all the video games I played, all the comic books that I've read. And it's gotten to a point where I've been lucky enough to like get media passes under my own show to like go to these conventions. So I pretty much have stayed within the New England area. Like Katsucon is the farthest I've ever traveled for a con. So yeah, I mean, cosplay is just a really wonderful and also insane hobby. Just looking at some of the stuff that people have created over the years, like as technology and like the wealth of information has gotten just larger, and I'm just sitting here drooling over photos like, holy shit.
Yeah, there's one of there's a couple of things that I learned that were really interesting to me that when it comes to like how like we learn as a sort of a collectively as a community. One of them is that if you want to make anything, you can basically go to a site like YouTube and find somebody who has shot a tutorial of it. Whether that, especially when it comes to things like, making foam armor or vacuum forming or figuring out how to weather something like that. The internet has been like a force multiplier for gathering up information and distributing it to a community. There's some instances, and I've come across people who can be very protective of the types of stuff that they do because they want it's sort of their little corner of the cosplay world, and they don't want anybody else to sit there. But like the genie's sort of out of the bottle when it comes to like sharing techniques and like shared practices and whatnot. But so that's one of the big things. And the same thing. Same thing. You can say the same thing for like forum posts and for like build threads, and those are sort of things that are harder to do on platforms like Instagram or Twitter. You could do like a tutorial on Instagram, but it doesn't feel like it's one of those things that you can really access as readily as opposed to something like a comprehensive build thread on a 501st forum. Like say if you're making Stormtrooper armor, you have sites like the First Imperial Stormtrooper Division or any of our other detachment forums where you have access. You have this deep dive information onto any of these costume types. Like if you want to learn anything about a Stormtrooper, you go to the FSID, or you go to clonetroopers.net or Pathfinders or wherever. Or like if for non-Star Wars stuff, you go to like the Replica Props forum, and somebody has, you find somebody who has documented their build for, I don't know, just, take your pick of costumes. So that like those resources really persist over time, and it makes it really easy for people to sort of like say, oh, I really want to make this costume. How do I do this? And then they can go follow in those footsteps, or they can gain the skills to do it themselves by going to these forums. It's like, all right, I want to make this costume. It's not, nobody's quite done it before, but if I make it out of foam, I can do this, or if I make it out of plastic, I can do this or that. And they can put together something really cool, and it's that I think helps strengthen the community. The other thing that I sort of the other random tidbit that I came across that really fascinated me was just how the like underlying technology changes in the entertainment world also have an impact. So the best example I have is everybody likes Boba Fett, or most people like Boba Fett. If you're a Boba Fett fan, you've scrutinized the films and tried to find the, if you've ever wanted to make a costume, you can go to the original films and sort of look at them and figure out, this is what the colors look like, or you could look at still photographs. There's a guy I spoke with, David Ray, who sadly passed away a couple of months after I spoke with him. He had cancer, and I was very fortunate to have spoken with him, but he gave me some pictures of himself, these costumes he made in the 1970s and 1980s. He made Stormtroopers and Darth Vader and a Boba Fett, all like cardboard and just stuff he found around his house. And this was before, he had internet reference pictures. So he went to the original Star Wars films, dozens of times. He took a notebook with him and it would sort of sketch out stuff and like look for little details that he might have noticed, he might have forgotten about in the earlier screenings. And then he made some really great looking costumes, like his Boba Fett looked really great. His Stormtrooper looked really great. He did Darth Vader. They're not like 100% screen accurate, but they, for the time, like they're pretty incredible.
Yeah.
And it attracted enough attention that like his local theaters like hired him to like put the costumes on and parade around when they re-released the films. Fast forward a couple years, you don't have to just go to the film in the theater or look for like a magazine like Starlog to get those reference pictures. That's where these forums come in. Is you could then people can take pictures of the stuff, especially once you get VHS. The like home video technology was a huge thing because you could now take the film home with you. DVDs, presented a very clear image, and that you could pause it exactly on the right frame without the scan lines, and so that was a huge game changer. But what really sort of blew my mind was when I was talking to a friend of mine, Bob Govier, who is he was our commanding officer in the 501st New England Garrison. And he's made an incredible Boba Fett. He did Darth Vader and a bunch of other costumes. And he was telling me that, a game-changing technology was the Blu-ray and high definition technologies, because what it did is it allowed them to sort of really focus in on costume parts that they had never seen before, because the resolution just wasn't there. So like when the Blu-rays for Star Wars came out, the people in these forums like honed in on Boba Fett, and they were able to find like, oh, it's this type of like not just like this is a calculator on his arm, but it's this brand of calculator. They were able to sort of figure it out by the shape and size. They were looking at, they were able to look at, I want to say it's his knee darts, which are some very obscure little pieces from a dental, some dental equipment. That level of detail is really kind of impressive. And, when you have these groups, you can take the time to sort of focus on that. But it's interesting that there's always, we're still learning things from these really old costumes that were used decades ago. It's these groups that really help keep these characters alive and well. Like I firmly believe that we wouldn't have a Boba Fett TV series now if Boba Fett was not as big a fan favorite character as he was, or the Mandalorian
favorite as he was.
I have my issues with the show itself, but like the fan community around the character really has let like Boba Fett only popped up for a couple of minutes in Empire Strikes Back. If nobody had like blinked an eye at him, that's the last we would have seen of him. But people loved him, and he came back, and then he came back in the comic books and then in novels. He came back to the Clone Wars TV series and the prequel trilogy, and now we have the TV show. Same thing with like the Mandalorians, like and it helps that like Dave Filoni is a fan of, like, he knows who the 501st and Mandalorian mercs are, and he's a fan of the work we do. So I believe, very strongly believe that, like, the fan community has had an impact on the types of things and the types of design choices that they make for the TV shows. Sure. There was a convention that I wrote about a couple years ago where he was at Star Wars Celebration. I want to say it was in Orlando, 2017, something like that. And he was saying that, like, the 501st had a huge impact on how we did the Clone Wars, because we would come up with new designs because we knew that they would go and make them. And then, fast forward a couple years later, when they're looking for, like, hey, we need like 25 more stormtroopers, they go to the 501st, and they they bring us in. And this isn't just a Star Wars thing. Like, you see big studios reach out to influencers and high traffic cosplayers who are really good at making stuff, and they will either bring them on to help promote the film, or they will sponsor stuff. There was a guy, this didn't make it into the book, but like there's a guy I was speaking with who had worked for HBO, and he was like, yeah, we use cosplayer stuff all the time for some of our marketing stuff. And it's interesting just to see how much the fan community can sort of become entangled with the entertainment world that it's a fan of. So that to me was pretty cool to see and to learn about.
Yeah, stuff like that. Like I know several cosplayers that they've done work with like Marvel and like some of their Marvel video stories, and like becoming some of these iconic characters that are like in like the MCU. And then like part of me thinks there was something recent about like hyping up the upcoming Lord of the Rings show for Amazon Prime. I think some cosplayers were invited to like help make costumes and like help promote like the teaser trailer that aired during the Super Bowl or something like that, if my memory is correct.
Yeah, I haven't heard of anybody really doing anything to help with the film production. There are cosplayers who make the jump from cosplay into the professional field. And there were some folks that there's a guy I spoke with who runs a studio, saying that he sort of shies away from hiring cosplayers because the type of work that goes into a film production is so different from what we make as fans. Because like these are costumes that really have to stand up to abuse. You can't take 6 months to make it. You have to like get it done within days or weeks. But at the same time, like this is a hobby where you can really hone those skills and then make the jump over, as long as you sort of have the right approach and the right mindset for it. So that I thought was pretty cool. But yeah, there's a bunch of people I have seen that have made that jump from fan to pro, and like even to the point where some of them are acting in the Mandalorian. There's a guy named Chris Bartlett who was a New England guy, I think. He became like the Lucasfilm's the go-to guy if they needed a C-3PO.
Oh,
So if they were shooting a commercial, if they needed him, like I think he brought C-3PO on stage for the Academy Award a couple years ago, or a bunch of years ago, things like that. And then he's since um, he's since become a character actor for like anytime they need somebody to go into a droid costume or a random alien. Like he's one of the guys that will do that, which is pretty cool. So I think we'll see more of that as time goes on. Because and I think
For
there's
sure.
probably some advantages there. Like, you know, cosplayers sort of understand like how costumes work, or, you know, what the, there is a certain amount of acting to what we do. I'll say that there's another really good high profile example is a guy. I don't know if you've seen the movie Kim's Convenience, or sorry, the TV series Kim's Convenience.
I don't think I have. No.
It's a Toronto sitcom. It's about an Asian, a Korean Canadian family who emigrate to Canada and open a the father and mother run a small convenience store.
Oh, I've heard of it. That's where Simu Liu got his start.
Yes, but the other guy that's where he got to start. But the other guy who's there is Paulson Hyung Lee, he plays one of the rebel pilots in The Mandalorian. He's also a member of the 501st Legion and Rebel Legions, and like one of the reasons that he was brought in apparently was because he knew through the Toronto acting community, he knew Deborah Chow, and she was like, you know, I know you're a Star Wars fan. Let's put you in here. And he actually knew more about the costume than he knew like exactly how to put the costume on, and didn't need help from the costume designers or outfitters. So that was kind of a neat sort of segue for him. So he's another really good example of how this is, how people percolate from fan to pro.
Yeah.
The other way that this happens is that, people might not be who get their start as cosplayers. They might decide that, they start to make stuff on their own. They open small shops. And it's much more easy to do that these days. You need a couple 3D printers, or if you are a good sculptor, some people can make a maybe not a living, or in some cases maybe make a living, but in some cases make a sort of a side hustle of making specific cosplay parts for people. I know Yaya Hong did really well selling cat ears. She wrote about that in her book, Yaya Han's World of Cosplay, how that was a big boost for her and allowed her to sort of become a full-time professional. But there's other folks who, like my friend Bob, who I mentioned a minute ago. He makes the headdresses for Ahsoka Tano, and he's like the go-to guy for that. Or there's other folks who make helmets or other armor parts, or they have a vacuum former that they're able to make churn out pieces of armor for people. So it's interesting just to see what other ways people can get out and sort of get into this hobby, or start this as a hobby and have it become sort of a profession or a vocation for them. So
no, it's funny because I was looking for a way to mention how when we talk about like the history of cosplay, that was something that was highlighted in Yaya's book. How when I just distinctly remember when I was getting into cosplay and finding her and her work, just going from, because I think she was the go-to person in order for cosplayers to get access to Warbler when that was starting its sort of like cosplay boom in terms of like being used for like a bunch of stuff for like armor making. And now it's just readily available through other shops. And like even she has her own line of Warbler, I believe, next to her fabric line with Joanne. So it's really interesting.
EVA foam.
EVA foam, sorry.
Yeah, she sells. Yep. Yeah, I actually have a couple sheets of that in my basement. I've got a project that I've been meaning to work on, and then it's I mean, that's one of the other cool things about this is that because this has become such a mainstream hobby, the materials and expertise are much easier to get to. When I got my first set of Stormtrooper armor back in 2003, it was one of those things where you had to know where to look And if you didn't know where to look, it was very hard to find it. Like as a teenager, I spent a long time trying to figure that out, and I just never found the right places.
Mm.
Um, when I finally connected with members of the 501st, I was like, oh, just send me a check and I'll send you the armor. And nowadays you can just go up onto a website and click a couple buttons, enter your credit card number, and it'll arrive at your door.
Mm-hmm.
One of the anecdotes I read about in the book is that Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse had just come out, and my son really loved the film. And so I went onto Amazon and I found a Miles Morales suit for him, and it was at my doorstep in just a couple days, and he was like
Yeah.
bouncing around as a Spider-Man. Like that type of access and that type of availability was just non-existent when I was
Yeah.
starting this out. And
Nope.
like nowadays you have companies that specifically cater to cosplayers, either through materials like the Yaya Han's line of EVA foam or fabrics. Being able to like prototype and to bring to production those very specific fabric types to consumers is like a huge game changer,
That's
because now you don't
insane.
have to
Yeah.
like there's some folks I spoke with who are within the Battlestar Galactica fan community, and like trying to make the flight suits requires some very specific types of fabric, and the more that companies sort of catch on that there is an audience for these types of things, the easier it is for people to get access to them. And so I think that these are all a whole bunch of reasons why cosplay is starting to become a main, maybe not 100% main, maybe not quite mainstream. If it's not mainstream, it's certainly on its way. And
Yeah.
it's because like the ease of access to parts or costumes or expertise or the ability to make it yourself have all been, those barriers have come down significantly. You don't need to go to obscure web forums to make a Spider-Man costume or to make a stormtrooper. You can just order one and have it there. And some of that mainstream, with that mainstream status, like things like Facebook will have certainly helped, or TV shows like The Big Bang Theory or Castle or Mythic Quest. Like these are all TV shows that have put cosplay front and center, and that also helps to sort of show people, like maybe you're a fan of Star Wars and you're like, I never really thought it, it never really occurred to me that I could dress up as one of these characters. And then you see it like in a TV show, like where these characters are doing that. Like, oh, I guess I could do that. That looks like fun.
Right.
And so that's been a huge thing as well. One of the things I point to specifically is Facebook, because what it does is it puts all your friends, or it puts all the contacts in your life into a single bucket. Whether you've got your work, your work colleagues, you've got your friends from your social circles, or your sports friends, or your D&D friends, your relatives, and it puts them all together. So when you go to a convention and you share your pictures, you're sharing it to everybody, and so everybody in your social circle now gets a glimpse of what it looks like. So like, hey, I went to a convention this weekend. I dressed up as this character, and now everybody can see that. And then they could, that is another way that the idea that like, hey, I can dress up as this character spreads around and expands. So I think it's with the cat's out of the bag, and like I don't think there's no going back, and I think it's just going to become a much bigger thing moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, talking about all this stuff, how stuff readily available as cosplay becomes more mainstream, and like how, like even like you got movie studios like jumping in to either have cosplayers or prop makers that can go from being a fan to jump into the professional, like and like working for these companies, or like reaching out to influencers. I'm also reminded of how you even have video game companies, certain ones, when they have new characters revealed, they just will flat out share links and images with character reference sheets that go from way beyond, and like this is what this part of the outfit, like the texture, like the kind of fabric it is, and then like all these like color codes is just absolutely massive.
So last year, in the lead up to Halo Infinite, I write for a website called Cosplay Central as sort of a side gig now these days. It's a
Okay, yeah,
website
I
put
know
up
that.
by
Yep.
Reed Top. Um,
Yep.
and one of the things I wrote about last year is Microsoft went and released this really extensive guide, and there's been this trend over the past couple of years of especially with video game companies, because the assets are there already. They can provide 360-degree views of the characters. They can give you the exact color schemes. They
Mm.
can give you the dimensions of stuff. Um, so we've seen over the years, like there are these handfuls of like specific cosplay guides for characters, and so 343 Industries put together this really extensive one. It was like 106. It was 106 pages, and it shows off detail on every single part of the armor. It shows you all of the different types, all the different colors that you need,
Whew.
like down to like the Pantone colors, or Pantone color. It's one of those words that I see and I imagine how you pronounce it in my head. But like it tells you exactly, like in it, extremely exact detail of like how does this look, and how
Yeah.
do you build it, and like that's another thing that, like, it's just, again, it's this ease of access, really helps people. So I imagine it was a huge help to people within that community, because now it takes the guesswork out of this. Like, if you want to make something
Yeah.
that's pretty exact to this characters, you don't have to like say like, all right, this is sort of how big this looks, but I don't know for sure, and you have to you might have to try it out, sculpt something, and like, oh, it's not quite the right size or shape, so you waste all that effort. Now you can just sort of put it together. um and so that, like, there's been all these other, um you know like these types of cosplay guides. I think that we'll definitely see more of them, um for all sorts of games coming up. And I haven't seen any recently, but I wouldn't be surprised if there have been other ones in the, uh coming up with whatever big video games there are. I'm sorry, I'm right as I'm talking, I'm googling to see if there's anything for like Elden Ring or something, because that's like the latest hit game,
Yeah.
anything like that. But I'm
I
sure
mean, I
there
think
will be others that will come out soon.
I've got a gut. I feel like they've already started doing it. And I've got a gut feeling that there's going to be more. But for God of War Ragnarok, oh my gosh, they're gonna.
Hmm. Yep.
There's going to be a slew of character reference sheet everywhere. Because Santa
There actually
Monica.
was. I remember seeing.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, they've already started. Yeah.
There was one. I want to say I wrote about it a couple when I was doing work on the book. I came across it. Let me see if they have a date on it. I have it bookmarked here. But yeah, that was another one. It showed a lot of details on like the face paint and the color types, and
Yeah.
it just gave you a much better idea of how to do it. And yeah, if you Google God of War cosplay guide, it comes right up. You don't really see this a lot for Hollywood studios at this point. Don't know if that will change or not, just because like,
Hmm.
uh, uh, like a film is complicated production, and the relationship that fans have to films and to, as opposed to fans to video games, is a little bit. I want to say like video game studios seem like a little bit more receptive of, or a little bit. They seem to maybe pay a little bit more attention to what fans want. Plus, I mean, the
Yeah, I
assets
can
are
believe
there.
that.
With with
Yeah.
an in-person film thing, you have to actually like you'd have to actually make the effort to actually like photograph and like write it up, as opposed to just sort of taking all those elements that probably that already exist for a video game. But it might, I wouldn't be surprised if we see stuff like that. A couple of like really early examples that I've seen, the when the Sci-Fi Channel released a TV show called The Expanse back in, I want to say 2015, they released they released some things to Thingiverse, like some free 3D files, for one for a helmet, and the other for it's a helmet and a couple of other, I, a couple of the spaceships, I think.
Yeah.
I have one of the spaceships that I printed up, but Sci-fi. Here's what it is. It's the Expanse Collections sci-fi, and you can find it on Thingiverse. And they have, there's a helmet there. I don't know if it's exactly like 100% accurate. Like I've seen it printed up, and it looks a little goofy, but it's also like the picture that they have is just the raw printed product. They haven't like weathered it or actually turned it into a costume part, but that's one example, and I hope that studios will do more of it. I hope that they will, because it is an asset to fandom, and as you build fans and you easier for fans to do this, they can do all sorts of that just sort of helps in the long run.
Yeah. Hang on, like 5. Oh, okay. She's laying down. I thought my cat wanted to get out of the room, but no, I think she stopped and she's laying down now, so we're good.
Sure.
Yeah. So circling back, I mean, through going through like your bio and then stuff about like brief description, like initial like thoughts about the book. I mean, you mentioned before that you were part of the 501st Legion. I actually don't think I know, or maybe I do, and it's just been a long time since I've heard. What's the process like in like becoming a member of such a giant like organization like the 501st?
Yeah. So the 501st, it started about 25 today. This year is our 25th anniversary.
Nice.
Started when a guy named Alvin Johnson dressed up as a stormtrooper. He's sort of a tragic backstory. He had been driving a motorcycle. He got into a really bad accident, and he had his leg amputated under his knee. And he was a bit depressed. And a friend of him at work wanted to cheer him up. He knew he was a big Star Wars fan, and so he used that to sort of like take his mind off of things. And when the special editions were coming out, he was like, hey, why don't we try to like dress up as stormtroopers for the films? And they went and they looked around forums. They paid a lot of money. They've got a couple stormtrooper suits, and then they started putting them together. And then 25 years ago this month, Alvin went and he dressed up for The Empire Strikes Back. And then a month later, in April, his friend, a guy named Tom Cruise, Crews, sorry, Crews, not like the famous Tom Cruise. They stood it up together, and Alvin realized at the time, like, hey, if we get a bunch of stormtroopers together, this is a really cool thing. And it just sort of grew from there. We have over 15,000 members now, all over the world, hundreds of different types of costumes. And so over the years, and we have our sister group, the Rebel Legion, and we sort of have similar remits. Like we're the bad guys, they're the good guys. We put together we have a couple of different sub organizations. So like geographically, we're broken up into garrisons or squads or outposts.
Okay.
Then we're also divided up by costume type. So all the stormtrooper, like we have a detachment called the First Imperial Stormtrooper Division, which does everything to do with stormtroopers. Like if you want to know anything, they're the ones who are looking at those costumes extremely closely. And they're the ones who make the standards for how we build those costumes and how we sort of present a unified look. So in order to join the group, you need to have a suit that matches our standards, and you have to be over 18. No criminal record, that sort of thing. So if you go and Google like 501st CRL, it stands for Costume Reference Library. CRL, you will come up with a data bank of all of our costumes that you can be approved with in the 501st. I don't know how many that is off the top of my head, but we have like there's 28 different categories. So that's ARC Trooper, Bounty Hunter, Clone Trooper, Imperial Crewman, Stormtrooper, Sith Lord, Republic Commando, AT-AT Driver, Scout Trooper, Clone Trooper. I already said Clone Trooper. Shore Trooper, Special Operations, and so forth. And then each one of those like break down into very specific types. So let me see if I can find it here. So like the clone trooper, you get a designation for TC, whatever your number is, and there are dozens of different types of clones that you see all over the place. Anytime you have it, like, so there's like the Attack the Clones Phase 1 Commander and Captain, Lieutenant, Sergeant, and Standard Trooper. But then when the Clone Wars comes out, you have all these other ones. So like we have specific CRLs for Clone Trooper Boyle or Danelle or Hardcase or Kix, Mixer, Rex. And so we in each one of those CRL pages contains a list of what you need to have that character approved. So let me pull like an example. My favorite one is a short trooper from Rogue One, and the squad. So I do a squad leader. So what that requires is you need to have the helmet, and on the thing on the page it says the helmet is tan with moderate weathering. There's an orange-red circular emblem on the right side of the visor, approximately 3 centimeters in diameter. Visor is trimmed in black along the lower edge. Ear holes have closed recess with one large and one small raised circle. Hole pattern, snout aerator, one recess vent on each side of the aerator, two wedge-shaped recesses on the outer edge of each mandible, so on and so forth.
Good God.
These... Yeah, it's very detailed as to what you need, and most of those details are pretty, like if you buy a helmet kit, like you 3D print a helmet, it's going to have all those details. You just need to make sure that it's proportioned right and it looks right, it has the right colors. But then like you need a balaclava, you need a neck seal or a shirt, the right shirt. The chest plate has to look like this. It has to have the right emblem and the right colors. And it's not a set of directions, but it is a guide for what you need what it needs to look like. And because we have these guides, every single short trooper around the 501st looks maybe not exactly the same, but they look approximately the same. So when you get a bunch of them together, you don't have like this huge variation that makes it really noticeably different. So, you get 100 stormtroopers together. It's like Celebration. It's a really awe-inspiring effect because they all look like we could have walked off the set of a Star Wars film.
Yeah.
So to join, you need to build a costume. And what usually people will do is they'll either come out of nowhere because they've done the research. They did this all on their own, or they join their local garrison as a sort of a newcomer. I'm trying. Every garrison has their own terminology for it, but like a recruit, and you get into the forums and you can ask questions of 501st members who have made these costumes before, and we'll chip in and help and give people guidance on like how do you make the costume. And there's an application process. You take pictures of yourself from 4 different sides, front, back, side, and side. And like they will go to a team of people who will say like, all right, this looks good, but you do need to change this a little bit here or there, or you need like, this is not in the right proportion. You need to redo this. And then once they give you the all clear, they give you a number, and you can become a member. And then once you're a member, the requirement is that you have to troop like once a year. That's sort of gone away because of COVID. Because hasn't been as many troops, but like a troop could be like a convention or like it's an officially sanctioned like event that we go to. So yeah, it might be a convention, it might be like a Make-A-Wish thing, it might be like a free comic book day event at your local comic book store. Any number of things. So yeah, there's been these types of that's the short version of how you join. Some people will sign up for the 501st. They'll make a stormtrooper, then they'll move on to other things. Or some people will say like, hey, I really like this character from this video game, and I'm going to make my own. I'm going to be the first person to do this. And they did provide all the documentation on like this is what all these pieces look like. So every time we have a new Star Wars production come out, where there's a new bad guy or a new Imperial type of trooper, you have people who are working on building those costumes, and then they will, as a collective group, will sort of come up with like what the standards are that we put for it. My short trooper, I built it before Rogue One came out. and it was an early version. So I like my early version wasn't quite up to snuff for acceptance because it was good enough to like show up for the film premiere, but like for it to become an officially approved costume, I needed to replace some bits. So I had because the pulls on the ABS plastic were soft. It was a very early kit because the film hadn't come out yet. But I ended up getting 3D printing some parts and adding them on, and I ended up the first version I had was the color was not quite right. But once we figured out what the right color was, I basically gave it a spray tan and reweathered it and went from there. And sometimes you upgrade costumes over time. 2019, we got word got put out that like, hey, we want to we're going to be inviting Star Wars fans to become a member or to go to the premiere of Rise of Skywalker. I was selected because I submitted a Attack of the Clones clone trooper. They didn't. There are not very many of us in the group, and they wanted a trooper from every state, and they wanted every single type of trooper from the entire Skywalker saga represented. So what I did ended up doing is I ended up pulling it out, and it's like, all right, this is not quite up to snuff. So I ended up repainting the entire suit of armor within like a week. Reweathered it. Ended up buying a whole bunch of other components. I want to say I had a new backplate that I put into it. I ended up buying a new belt, which I still haven't quite installed yet. I have to do some cutting and some measuring on that. What else did I do? I bought a clone trooper backpack, which I've brought out a couple times. I made a set of micro binoculars, so I've upgraded the kit over the years that I've made it. And like other kits, like I'm sure that like there'll be other costumes that I'll make that I'll make these other minor little adjustments to over the years, just depending on like how whatever we learn about them, or if I realize like, oh, this isn't really quite accurate enough, let me see if I can add to it or something. So yeah.
Wow, that's a lot, but I mean, it sounds like it's a lot of. No, that's perfectly fine. But I mean, it sounds
I've also been doing it for a long time, so like this is not something that happens overnight. Like I've been doing this for a number of years, so like a lot of these changes, like they happen over years. So like my first stormtrooper, I still have it. I'm never going to get rid of it, but it's a costume that is not. It's a type of stormtrooper armor called FX, and it's not very accurate. Some of the details are molded wrong. The chest is slightly the wrong shape. The helmet that it came with is really big. And that was sort of that's when I started taking cosplay a little bit more seriously when it came to like accuracy stuff.
Sure.
I started looking at like, all right, I can change the belt on this to be because the original belt that came with was plastic. So I swapped out the belt for for a canvas one. I swapped out the helmet for something that was a little bit more accurate. I switched out the hand plates so that it was accurate to Empire Strikes Back. And then I went and bought an entirely new Stormtrooper that was made an entirely different sculpt that was much more accurate. And that's the one I use nowadays. So, they're like people will make these changes over years, especially as we learn more and more about these types of costumes. I don't know that there's much we can learn more about Stormtroopers, but like, as the franchise continues on, there'll be certainly new characters and new costumes that we'll be able to build and to really dig in on.
Yeah, for sure. Well, now I'm curious about a couple of things. One, are you excited, as probably I am, for the Kenobi series that's coming out in a couple of months?
A little bit. I was never as huge a fan of the prequel trilogy. Like it was not really the show it was not the series of films that I grew up with. I liked them when they came out. Certainly the Clone Wars has made it a little bit better for me. It was not one that I was terribly enthused for because it's like one of those stories that like I'm sort of not sure what the story is. I'm going to watch it for sure. But it's like sort of like is this a TV series that is just being put out there just to sort of fill time, or did they actually come up with a good story? It seems I have a feeling that it's going to be one of those ones where they are like they're looking for something that is a little bit. It might be a little bit better because they had to go and redo all the scripts. When the pandemic hit, they had the show got pushed back for quite a bit. So I'm hopeful that it will be pretty good.
Yeah.
The one that I'm more excited about is Andor, the Cassian Andor TV series.
Okay.
Which is also supposed to come out this year. I imagine we'll get a release date or some update about it when Celebration comes about. But the reason I'm more excited for that is just that Rogue One was like the film for me. Like I adore everything about that movie.
Yeah.
I mean, I dress up as a shore trooper. I have my helmet right here, actually, in my office. And we're going to be seeing these guys again in the show. We've seen, hopefully that's not too much of a spoiler, but we've seen like shots of those troopers coming. They will be a presence there. But like when I saw Rogue One, I was just really taken by just how it complicated the story of the Rebel Legion, or sorry, the Rebel Alliance, and like what the dark, like sort of like their dark side, like what efforts they went to. And when I saw the film, I realized, I was always sort of hopeful that they would do more with it, just because there's so much potential to be mined out of it from Cassian's story. So that's the one I'm really excited for, and I really hope is good. And because there's so much that they can do with that story. So that's what I'm most excited about. Yeah. I'm a little bit wary of like the single character shows, just because like Boba Fett, it's like I liked all the parts of it, but I was sort of disappointed by just how it turned out. It felt very much like it would have benefited from a little bit more time and effort thinking about the story and like what they were trying to do with it. And if people liked it, I'm not trying to take that away from them, like their enjoyment, but like I also tend to overthink things when it comes to like how good a TV show is, or like what details go into it. I worked as a reviewer, so
right.
Not everything that has the Star Wars logo on it is going to be good. Like there has to be some things that just don't quite hit the mark, and for me, Boba Fett didn't quite hit the mark, but it did do a lot of cool things, and I did enjoy watching it. I definitely think that it got me really interested in doing a Tusken Raider costume. I don't know if I'll do that or not, but it's one that I have thought serious about doing. But we'll see. But like I think that the franchise certainly has a bright future on Disney Plus going forward. I will also say that I'm very excited to see whatever happens to the Rogue Squadron film, whatever that, if it seems to be still in production. Hopefully it will still be in the works. And I like one of the costumes I do is the Blue Squadron General from Rogue One, and I've always been a big fan of Mike Stackpole's Rogue Squadron novels. So like I'm excited to see what those come up with, and I'm excited particularly to see what the costumes are and if we see new trooper types or whatever. That goes with any film franchise these days. The new Lord of the Rings TV series, I'm pretty interested in seeing what we get out of that from a costume perspective. From the looks of things already, they look pretty cool. And there's like any number of films and TV shows that are coming out. Like there's always going to be there's no end to what we can dress up as.
No end in sight. I know. I mean, I know for me, having grown up when I was little as the prequel movies were like releasing, I think I just got a very strong spot for some of the characters. Like I adore Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan, so I'm like beyond pumped to see how this series pans out.
That will be exciting to see, especially because he's he is the bright spot out of the prequel trilogy, I think, and it'll be exciting to see like what he brings to the role now that it's is it 17 years later, something like that. Like that should be pretty cool.
They mentioned that they also brought back Hayden Christensen, and I'm like, how are they gonna? What are they gonna do with this? I'm very intrigued at what they're gonna do. So,
he's gonna be Darth Vader. I mean, he's there as Darth Vader. So
I know, but I'm I mean, maybe he'll be under the suit, or will we actually hear his voice, or is it going to be muffled by James Earl Jones's Vader voice? I don't know.
Yeah, and I mean, as I said, I'm being like cautiously optimistic about it. I'll be excited to see. I'll be interested to see like what they end up doing, and hopefully it'll be good, and hopefully it will live up to like what everybody really loves about those characters. And even if they don't quite live up to like what the current fans are, like, you know, each one of these new TV shows is a new introduction to an entirely new generation of fans. So like when the Clone Wars TV series was first coming out, I remember there was a lot of like older time fans, you know, who had grown up with like the special editions or the originals, were like not really big fans of it because it was very childish. But like, I also, you know, sort of kept in mind that like, even if this is not quite my jam, this is something that a lot of kids are seeing, and this is how you introduce an entirely new generation.
It's opening the floodgates for new fans.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so, you know, those fans have grown up and they're enjoying The Mandalorian, and they're enjoying the Book of Boba Fett and whatever other shows are coming out down the road. And then so the kids, or the teenagers or the young adults who are coming to Star Wars for the first time with The Mandalorian or the Book of Boba Fett or Andor or Obi-Wan, like, they're going to be fans for the next 25 years, or the next, you know, however long, you know, they keep doing this. So it's very cool to see like this, you know, the you know, fans sort of continuing to sort of persist along these franchises. And you know, it's you know, that's the next era of like cosplay history is going to be, they're going to be the ones undertaking that.
Pretty much,
that'll be exciting to see.
If they'll be inspired by all these shows that they've been watching and growing to love and wanting to make new outfits and. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Like, they're definitely going to be doing that. And we're going to be seeing like, they're going to have their own takes on characters, and they're going to, you know, because they have this platform of, you know, all the work that people have done up to now. They've got YouTube, they've got, you know, files on Thingiverse or Facebook groups or forums. Like, you know, these are all like resources that are just going to continue to build cosplay bigger and bigger and bigger. We hopefully, you know, provided, you know, something drastic doesn't happen. Like even COVID was a really drastic thing, and that didn't stop cosplay. Like, that's still a big thing, despite of that, which I was happy to see. Like, I was happy to, you know, because I finished the book like a week before the COVID-19 lockdown started here in Vermont, and I was a little bit worried. Like, you know, is this like, if we don't have conventions, are we going to be done? Like, is this going to be?
Is this the death of the hobby, so to speak? Yeah.
Right. And it just went on to, you know, it just went on to Instagram, and people just, you know, they did memes or collective videos, on there. And then, you know, conventions are starting to open back up. I've been to a couple. I ended up writing an entire chapter about COVID-19, and took pictures at cons at a couple of New England cons with people wearing masks. And yeah, it's just like one of those, you know, it's still a thing that's coming around. So
yeah. Have any of your favorite like convention memories, have any of them like seeped its way into the book, like got like some mentions throughout?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Star Wars Celebration, the first one I went to was a huge influence for me. I'm pretty sure I mentioned it in the book. I talk about it to some extent. You know, I went to Celebration in 2019, and that's where I started interviewing people for the book. And I took a bunch of pictures there of folks, and it was a good networking thing. Like, I went to Dragon Con later that year, and that was I interviewed more people there. So yeah, like some of those cons are, you know, they I mean, because I was interviewing folks there, they definitely make it in there. But like, you know, it's just you know, so there's some other memories of going to conventions that I just had a lot of fun and just made friends and, you know, dressed up and just generally had a good time. So
yeah. Oh, that's great. No, I'm actually really excited to flip through this book and take a read through it, because it sounds like it's going to have a lot of good information, just a good retrospective on the hobby, on like where it started to where we are now. So
I hope
And
so. I mean,
yeah,
it's a book that it's cosplay a history, not cosplay the history. So I will say that it's you know it's slanted a little bit towards my interest in the 501st and my experience in the 501st, but like I think that it's a good overview of the broad parts of the hobby. And that's
mhm.
something, you know, with any history book, like I was literally rewriting and researching up to the last minute, like literally the last minute. I was adding things in before I had to turn in my final draft. And I still have changes that I've learned things since turning it in that that have not made it into the book that I'm hoping I can make it in. It's not quite final. It's not quite locked in yet. So as the time we're recording this, I'm hoping that I can slip in a brief mention of so something I learned recently is Arthur Conan Doyle, the guy who created Sherlock Holmes. He was best known for Sherlock Holmes, but his favorite character was a character called Professor Challenger. He was the lead character in The Lost World, where these explorers go out to South America and they find dinosaurs in this isolated plateau.
Okay.
And he actually dressed up. He dressed up as a character, and I learned that only like months after finishing the book. I'm like, crap, I really want to include that. So hopefully, I'll be able to slip a mention of that in somewhere. And I'll also say that, like, you know, there are sections of the book that you could write entire books of on their own, like the history of anime and like specifically Japanese cosplay. Like, you know, that's you can devote a lot of time
Oh yeah.
to that, you know, that specific subculture of that, or you can devote an entire book to the 501st Legion, or science fiction fandom. Like, you know, this is a hopefully, you know, in depth but broad overview of everything, and
Yeah.
or almost everything. So, but yeah, it's like one of those things where, you know, there's always more to learn, and there's like I'm sure that once the book comes out, I'll meet people who will tell me things that are like, oh man, I really wish I had met you earlier. Like the other day, I came across somebody who had a really great Star Trek picture of their Star Trek cosplay from like the 1970s. I was like, oh man, this is great. I wish I could have used it, but
Yeah.
you know, at some point you have to stop, and it has to
You
you know, you
gotta
have to
submit it. You gotta
put it
stop.
first. But you know, maybe we'll do a one of the things I'm thinking of doing is like I read a newsletter about science fiction fantasy. I'll probably end up doing some like quote unquote lost chapters of stuff that I come across that I
Yeah.
really wish I could have included or something, and I'll put those out to subscribers or something like that. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
So
Well, I'm just looking through my little notes here. Okay, so then I guess something that we could touch on before we wrap up. Um, Throughout this whole process, I mean, you've had a lot of experience in history with like writing articles for various websites, and obviously with this book. What would you say was a difficult aspect throughout this book's like construction, like through
um
making it?
yeah, I mean, part of it was just trying to get in touch with some of the right people. So like some of like the big name cosplayers, I just was never able to get in touch with. Like, you know, I'd send emails or contact the reps, and just never was able to connect to them. But
Yeah,
even then, it was like, you know, I was able to find other folks who, you know, and that's just the nature of any nonfiction books, is sometimes you just can't, you know, you can't find you just don't connect to like the right person who was there or something. But you know, I was able to connect to a lot of great people. And you know, I was actually even happier with some of the folks that I came up with, like just because they had slightly different perspectives, or their own really great perspectives that brought some new viewpoints or ideas that really sort of got me to think about the book and the story in just some slightly different ways.
yeah,
So that was, you know, that's sort of just the nature of research, is that you are just just trying to find the right resources and the right sources. one specific thing that that was sort of a challenge was Forrest Ackerman. He was a fan in the 1930s. He's one of the first guy to dress up at a convention at the first Worldcon, and he was a big name within fandom for decades. He had a small museum at his house, and like he had like correspondence and books and things that he edited. And all of his papers ended up at the University of Syracuse, and he's got a dedicated art. There's his papers are in their archives.
Huh.
And when I went to go try to access them, like the files are just off limits. I want to say it's because they are trying to. They're doing something with them at the archive, but it was just like one of those things where like I emailed them to ask like, is there any way I can get access to this because I'm writing this book, and they just weren't. They wouldn't permit me to look at them. So like I don't know if there is something in Forrest Ackerman's papers that might add some more fidelity to the story that I tell in the book.
Right.
But I got the broad, I got some good quotes about him anyway, and I have things that he wrote from fanzines and stuff. But maybe there's some insights that he had about like making the costume, or how his girlfriend Myrtle Douglas, or her name, she went by the name Moroyo. Like maybe there's some insights there, or some correspondence that specifically talks about it, or what his like. I wasn't able to get into his head and understand like what he was thinking. So
right,
maybe those will be unlocked at some point, and I'll be able to get access to them, and then I'll learn that. But the other thing is that this hobby is so big, is that there's this everyone has their own origin story, and like anytime you write a nonfiction piece, like you are telling a version of the story, and obviously the more voices you can get to it, the closer to reality you get to. And I think I did a good job with that. But like there's always going to be more stories. There's always going to be more people to talk to. And so this is something I'm definitely like. This book is not a one and done thing for me. Like I'm definitely going to be writing about cosplay for years on end. I don't know if that means if I'll write another book about cosplay, but I'll be definitely commenting on it and like studying it. Maybe we'll do
active within the community. Yeah,
and I'm definitely going to be trooping for as long as I find it fun and exciting. And that's because it brings me a lot of joy to do that. Like it's a joyful activity, and that's what I like about it. And that's what I hope when people read the book, they will understand it better. They'll understand where it came from and why it came about and how it came about, but also just get a sense of like, this, why we do this is because it's fun, it's exciting, it's joyful. It brings excitement to people and to other fans, and it allows us to connect to one another in ways that we might not have met before. So, I know from my own personal experience, like I've made some of the best friends in the world, who like, people who have been to my wedding, and been like very close friends who are cosplayers, and I never would have met them in any other way. Our lives just never would have intersected any other way. And that's a great thing, I think. So
absolutely, same here. I mean, I'm not married, so I mean, I imagine I might hit that point where I'll invite some of my cosplay friends to my wedding. I don't know, but yeah, like cosplay is just a wonderful thing that allows us to geek out and just be fans over similar interests, and just go like buck wild and spend a crap ton of money at conventions. Oh man. Yeah, absolutely. And I guess so the last thing I'll ask is that, so I mean, you talked about and discussed like your history and like all the various costumes that you've made. So I'm curious, do you have a quote unquote dream cosplay that you'd like to make one day? Or either if you'd like to make one day, or a cosplay where if I had all the knowledge and all the money in the world, what cosplay would you want to construct?
Oh yeah, no, I've got a whole list of those.
Oh, good.
I mean, it's the nature of building costume after costume, and just you always want to build more. So the one that's right on the top of my list, if I get around to doing it, is um there's a TV show called The Expanse. It's based off of a book series by the same title by a guy named James S. A pair of authors that call themselves James S. A. Corey, Daniel Abraham and Ty Frank. There's a character named Bobby Draper who is a Martian Marine, and she just has the coolest set of power armor out there. It's part spacesuit, it's basically like what you would get. When I read Starship Troopers as a kid, like that's the armor that I envisioned. It looks cool. It's armed to the gills. It's got it's a deadly walking thing, and it just looks awesome. That's one that I would like very much to make. And actually, while I was at Dragon Con in 2019, one of the two of the people I interviewed, they made their own versions out of EVA foam, and I've got a great picture of them in the book.
Cool.
Jack Durnan and his now wife Jenny. Jack is currently making. He has the model. He has the files to make, and he's 3D printing the entire suit of armor right now. And I'm very jealous because it's definitely a costume I would like to make. And I've actually got a folder of reference pictures of when I came across one of the screen used suits when I visited the set when I was at one point. At 2 points, I visited the set twice for 2 different seasons, and I was able to sort of see. No, sorry, I saw the armor at a convention. They had a display, but I've seen the costumes up close on the film studio. So that's one of them. It looks very cool. It's just an amazing looking costume. One of the ones that I've really I like to make at some point is a set of armor from Halo. Probably the Reach variation, just because that's been a video game that I've loved for decades now. And there's other costumes along the way. Like I've got a suit of Mandalorian armor down in my basement that I've been thinking about doing. I was at one point I was thinking about doing the Din Djarin's costume, but I'm probably not going to end up doing that one. I've got another short trooper in my basement. I've got a first order trooper that I'm going to replace my other one with. And there's no end to you make a list, and then then there's there's the TV shows and the films that they're coming out this year or next year. Like I would love to. I don't even know what I would love to make at some point, but I'm sure that there's something that'll come out this year or next year or the year after that. I'll see that and I really need to make that. And now that I've got the skills and hopefully the wherewithal to actually follow through and do it at some point.
Right. Yeah, I know for me, my all the money in the world knowledge dream cosplay would have to be a full-blown set of Dragoon armor from Final Fantasy, because I am a sucker for that class. That's the class that I'm playing, because I'm playing through Final Fantasy 14 online for the first time, and so that's what I'm doing right now. And I'm just looking at the armor and just like, man, I want to be a dragon, man.
That's one of the really exciting things about video game, and I think one reason why cosplay has taken off in some ways is that video games allow a really specific set of personalization. I know with the new Halo Infinite, just because I've been playing that recently, you can really customize that armor to really match your preferences.
From what I've seen, yeah,
and you can change the color in the armor paste. You can swap out the helmet. You can swap out every single piece of armor. You can make it your own. And that's one of the kind of the cool things about. So when I was at Dragon Con, I interviewed a friend of mine, Katie Henderson, who was a big Destiny fan, and she was part of the Destiny cosplayer photo meetup. Every single one of those suits of armor was different, but they're all individual based on what those cosplayers had put into the game. What their personal preferences were, and it was all really cool because it's all unique. that's something you don't really get with like stormtroopers because they're all look the same. And I think there's an appeal to that, especially if you have a group of them. But if like video games allow you to really personalize that costume and make it your own, and so if you're somebody who really sinks a lot of time into one of these games, you will then have a really interesting challenge on your hands to make your own, to replicate that armor because it's yours. Nobody else is going to come up with exactly the same type of armor that you have.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we covered a lot, and this was incredibly I mean in the best way possible, like incredibly enjoyable. Before I guess we start to sign off, is there anything else that you personally would like to mention or talk about regarding the book, or anything about like just cosplay in general?
No, I think we covered most of it. I'll say the book is out June 28th from Saga Press. It'll be a paperback. It'll be an ebook. It'll be an audiobook. I'm excited and apprehensive to see what people think. I hope that people enjoy it. It's one of those ones where like I've been working on it since like I think the first conversation I had about the book happened in 2016. So I've been working on it for a long time. It's all largely been in my head and on my computer, and now people are starting to read it. Like it's gotten some good reviews so far, and I've been really happy that people have been enjoying it. But like it's like one of those things when you're a writer, it's like your own worst critic. Like I'm going to be sort of just biting my nails about like what people think about it. And I hope people like it. I really hope they get a lot out of it. I hope they learn something about the history of the entire movement, and they come away with, if they are a cosplayer, I hope they come away with it with a new level of appreciation for it. If they are not a cosplayer, or if they're just a fan or just somebody who happens to pick it up, I hope they learn what a really great, vibrant, wonderful world this is. And hopefully we'll be motivated to do it themselves. And I'm looking forward this summer to like going out to bookstores to sign copies, and I'm excited to see if people will if I'm going to a convention, if somebody will bring me a copy in costume, because that'll be very cool. But
that'd be dope.
That's putting the cart ahead of the horse. So
yeah. All right. Yeah. No, I'm really looking forward to reading the book myself. This was an absolute treat. I mean, I can't thank you enough for allowing me this opportunity to chat with you, get to know you more, interview you about the book. And I guess with that being said, Andrew, if people want to follow your cosplay adventures or adventures into the 501st, where should they go to follow?
So you can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Andrew Liptak, ANDREWLIPTAK. I'm on Instagram. I'm at LIPTAKAA, Liptaka. And I also write a newsletter called Transfer Orbit. That's transfer-orbit.ghost.io. It's a little bit of a convoluted name, but if you find me on Twitter or Instagram or anywhere, you can find a link to that. And that's where I do a lot of my. I've been trying to pull back from social media a little bit, just because for my own personal sanity. But like the newsletter is where I sort of dump a lot of my sort of in-depth thoughts on like science fiction, fantasy. I do book reviews, I do book lists, and I'll be talking a lot about cosplay and fandom and everything else in between there.
Nice. So. Okay, and you guys can follow me at the usual spots, Twitter and Instagram under at Blue Lightning Cos, and then you can just catch me on my stream schedules over on Twitch. And this was great. I hope you guys enjoyed listening to this episode, and stay tuned for the next one, and I will see you guys all next time.